Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Mastering Retention Podcast. I am Tom Hammond, co-founder of UserWise and your host. I will say this is like my favorite time of the week. I get to talk to such smart, awesome people. And today I'm actually joined with Max Mozgovoy. I think I got the name right. We'll be talking about all sorts of fun stuff about analytics and CRMs and great stuff about making games. Max, before we dive into stuff though, I always like to ask, what's your story? How'd you get into this world of games?
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. First, I just wanted to thank you for having me here. Actually, I really appreciate that. And actually, I really love gaming, like from being like a child. So even like in the mid 90s, I played a lot with some, let's say, ZX Spectrum. Maybe you heard about this platform, PC games. So I was loving games like RPG, RTS genres. Yeah, so I really love the gaming industry, and I was like an avid gamer myself. So when a company called Wargaming, they're really famous for their games like World of Tanks, World of Warships, World of Warplanes. Invited me to join their team in 2015. I didn't hesitate to actually accept, and I really enjoyed it a lot. It was one of the best experiences I had. And I was responsible for the global CRM analytics there. And since then, I actually worked also in a company called Gamehouse, which is basically focused on casual mobile games for women as the analytics director.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I went there.
Yeah. And then is it your company, the SegmentValue?
Yeah, actually.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. I started my own consulting business quite a couple of years ago, right? I created a company called SegmentValue. It's an analytics and CRM consultancy company. The name is interesting because actually it's about the segmented marketing and measuring future customer value. So it's all about the CRM, analytics, managing the customer base, and all that stuff.
Okay, well, we're going to get into that a lot, so that'd be fun. Do you typically work with just like general companies? Do you work with games companies at all?
Yeah, I really focusing on the game industry as well. So like actually helping game developers, small studios. But actually my let's say experience is more than the gaming industry, but actually I'm focusing on the different companies like e-commerce, finance as well. So something like that.
Cool. Okay. So I would like to start with okay. So CRM. For folks that aren't really familiar with that, can you define what a CRM is and maybe why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. I really know that many people just considering CRM like some kind of a program or some kind of a system, and they're like misunderstanding the whole concept of CRM. For me, the concept of CRM is basically the business strategy of managing the customer relationships in the long term. So it's not like just some kind of a tool, some kind of a program that's focused on the sales, for example, or like targeted marketing or service or managing the some things like let's say customer experience management. It's all part of the CRM, but the whole idea is to manage the longer term relationships with every customer. Mm-hmm. And that means you need to understand how you can manage it. So like you need to understand how to build this relationship with each with each user, with each customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that easy. It's not just one one process or one program. It's a kind of, and sales are definitely not enough, right? So like if you have a perfect sales, but you have like a, this kind of leaky bucket concept, right? So like you have lots of inflow, but actually some holes in your bucket, and then all your customers just leaving, and the churn is super high. So actually you're losing value in a longer perspective. That's why actually everyone is focusing on sales, but that's a problem. So like I feel like there is not enough focus on the retention, on managing the long-term relationships. That's why I really love this kind of podcast.
So, like, can you use a CRM within games? So, like, historically, when I think of CRM, I think of like Salesforce.
Yep.
Obviously, it's all based around like somebody's email and company and stuff. Like in games, like I don't feel like, at least on mobile games, you usually don't have the person's email address. So, like, can you even use them there? Like, and isn't it mostly about like email marketing and stuff like that? Like, how do they
Yeah.
work in games?
Yeah, there is some thinking game like called Live Ops. Probably you know certainly about that. So like
Just a
Live
little
Ops,
bit, a little bit.
a little bit, yeah. So it has the different name. It's not CRM, it's Live Ops, but more or less the same idea. So how to manage the let's say the relationship with the users while some kind of actions, while some kind of engagement tools and so on. But again, that's more than that. So like Live Ops, it's just a part of it. So like first, it's the product itself, right? So like if a product made for good retention, and it has like engaging gameplay and tactical depth, things like really interesting moments in the game, let's say unexpected moments, some kind of things of surprise, because actually it's really important to surprise the audience. If the game is not surprising, it's actually it's when it's being repetitive and boring, it doesn't have much chance on retaining people out, right? So like that's can be part of the game design also. So like definitely the product itself is really important, but also the live ops, direct communications, targeted communications, and also let's say analytics, because analytics it's all about understanding how the customer will behave in the future, right? So like that means like we need to understand what would be the next actions of this particular player, how he will behave in the future, whether it's actually have this kind of tendency to churn, or maybe he's actually getting bored, or having problems with some levels also. So like it's different things that can be a negative experience during the gameplay, right? So like that means we need to track it and respond to it efficiently. And many games are not doing it at all. So like if someone is basically facing some problems, some challenges within the game, it's not being addressed by the game, right? So like usually the whole layer of the communications with the users based on their experiences is not actually addressed. And that's can be a huge problem when we're talking about like a long-term retention.
So how would you, like in an ideal world, how would you address that, or how would I interact with my players in that way?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I can tell you some kind of examples if you want to. So actually,
Yeah, I love examples. Yeah, we love examples.
yeah. So like in wargaming, we've created this system that actually that was tracking the every interaction with the player. So we've gathered a huge analytics and huge data as how the
Is an interaction like the player just coming into the game, or is that like me talking to them or something like that? Like what is an interaction?
actually the interaction is basically also the gameplay profile. So how do they play?
Yep.
How often do they play? What are their favorite, let's say, units and so on? So actually all that stuff. So actually there is a huge meta gaming about that, but the idea was to understand what is the behavior of each user based on the in-game behavior. So it's not just a general stuff, but it's actually how the users are playing the game. And what we did, we actually created the whole lot of machine learning models that are predicting the future behavior of each individual user, each individual player. And we can deliver the messages to these users in real-time manner or close to real-time. So when the model is predicting that this customer, for example, like is going to churn, then we can design the campaign. For example, what is the actual factors that impacting this churn for this particular player? And if we can identify these factors, then we can address that. Or even if we can't identify these kind of factors, then we can do something more generic, but still we're trying to retain them.
Yeah. So can you actually do things like in the game, like edit, like I know sometimes when I churn out of a game, especially a competitive type game, it's because I lost, a few times in a row and then you get that rage quit. I'm just uninstalling this game kind of a thing. So could you effectively figure out, wow, Tom just lost 4 games in a row. Like maybe we should change his matchmaking so that he can actually like match with somebody and win. Otherwise, he's probably just going to get, pissed off and leave.
Yeah, actually, this is like a dynamic difficulty thing. So like it's really popular in the games. But the idea is to understand how the players are reacting to the game environment in general, and to understand what is the basically the problematic areas within this gameplay, right? So like if, for example, we have something like negative experience because of, like, say, rage quitting, or some problems with some series of losing to some other players in a multiplayer game specifically, then probably we need to address that and actually to say, okay, man, you're doing great still. So like we can even give you some boosters or some other things, so you can just apply it and have more, let's say, relaxed and more successful battles in the future, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about this idea of segmentation, because at large, I think, especially in the gaming industry, everyone kind of talks about segmentation as this, awesome, really cool thing that we can do. And I don't really see many people that really do it or really do it well. So I'm curious, like, do you have any examples of times you've seen segmentation done really poorly? And then actually, we'll get into, like, really well, but like, what's some examples of like poor or incorrect segmentation, and how's that played out?
Yeah, the whole idea of segmentation is basically differentiating the users on some property, and you can segment depending on the goal on different things. For example, you can segment by the color of the eyes, right? So like, but it doesn't make the business sense, right? But
unless they're blue eyes, because we're the best.
Yeah. But that's an interesting question about the different kind of segmentation. So there are multiple ways of segmenting the customers. So based on their needs, based on their behaviors, based on their actually loyalty, based on their value, based on their potential, based on their social demographic factors, based on their let's say profile, gaming profile, or let's say whether it's casual player or hardcore player. So actually all that stuff, it's different, let's say, dimensions for segmentations, right? So like it's really difficult to think about just one kind of segmentations. I did a lot of different things, different segments, but it's also the key question is how to figure out what segmentations will be most useful for this business goal. So this is the right question that we need to ask. What's the goal for this particular segmentations? How are we gonna use it? So, well, like, it's like not that, okay, we need to somehow segment our users, but okay, we can do this and this and that, but does it make sense, like in general? And
I'm starting to understand why your company is called SegmentValue. Okay, so let's go back a little bit because I think this could be a very, very useful exercise for people. So you listed out a whole bunch of different types of segments. Can you maybe go through each of those, but say, here are maybe 2 or 3, campaign or business goals, use cases of why I would segment players this way. And we'll kind of go through each of those different buckets to give people some really like actionable ideas.
Yeah, actually, the whole idea of the customer-based management is the segmenting the players on the 3 main variables. First of them is basically their loyalty or their predicted loyalty, let's say. So basically, it's like a churn metric or the metric of individual propensity to churn for this particular user. The second one is basically understanding the future value. So what would be the cash flow of these particular users in the future, not just right now. So like also like many game companies are just treating LTV as a current LTV. So like that's current value of the users and doing it like an average level. So like we can just grab all the value and actually dividing onto the users. So actually it doesn't make sense. So what I'm talking about is basically value. It's individual value projected to the future. So it's a model that predicting the individual user value in, let's say, a month period of time or 6 months period of time. Of course, the accuracy of that model can be, let's say, more or less accurate, but let's say the idea is to figure out what will be the future value, not the current value. And of course, the current value is just only the small part of value. So that's that.
Yeah. How would you use that in a camp? So I think I understand the concept of, okay, I've made a segment of $5 future value in a month, $10, 20, and maybe 50 or something. So I got a few segments. How would you actually use those segments within a campaign or something to actually do something?
Yeah. So the idea of using future value is to understand how much can we spend on the retention of the users, right? So like, this is actual money. So it's not the, let's say, virtual currency. It's actual money that, because actually players spending actual money, right? So like they're spending, for example, like $100, and you can, if you, for example, if they are high with the high probability of churn, and we still have like $50 to retain them, it would be a huge deal, right? So like we are spending $50 to retain the $100 customer, right? Yep. And that means you can identify the actual money or offer that you can make to this particular user in order to retain them. And this kind of offer can be really measured in some real money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first case.
Yeah. So I could kind of either give them a highly discounted offer, or I could gift them some free content or something like that that has, like $50 of value, because that's going to get them to retain and ultimately spend the $100 of value kind of thing. So that's the first case. Okay.
Yeah. The second one is to identify the whole efficiency of your marketing activities, targeted marketing activities, live ops event, feature changes, and so on. Because right now, the current A/B test actually showing just the, let's say, pretty narrow horizon in terms of like, okay, what will happen in next week or next 2 weeks. But the problem is when you're stimulating or making the customers pay for something, right? Then you can probably drive the sales at first, but then there will be a decline or a gap in sales. Yeah. So it's a really common situation, right? And also your aggressive sales efforts can drive churn. So actually you can damage your longer term value. Mm-hmm. So the idea is to understand what would be the actual incremental efficiency of your combined LTV compared to the control group. And then if you can identify these things, you can see that these campaigns are really driving value, or these events are really driving value, or these, let's say, feature changes are really driving value, because it's not just a regular shorter term, let's say, increment of RPU or of RPPU, for example, but this longer term increase of LTV. And that's why you need to calculate this kind of longer term LTV, because you can't wait like 6 months before it actually will become, let's say, obvious for you. But you need to know these kind of changes based on actual changes in the behavior of the user base as early as possible.
Interesting. Very interesting. Can you use segmentation to do different, like, so let's just talk about ads because it's easier than maybe thinking about other things, but like, as a user, there's probably a certain number of ads that I'm willing to tolerate. So like YouTube, how it used to be a few years ago when, every maybe like 3 or 4 videos, I'd have like a single ad.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, nowadays it's like 2 or 3 ads minimum before I watch any video, and it irritates the heck out of me. And I've almost wanted to start my own version of YouTube to get away from it.
Yeah.
So like they've gone beyond my threshold, or maybe they haven't, because I still sometimes use it. But to me, they've broken their trust with me. I don't like YouTube anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, I could use segmentation to kind of group users based on, what is their ad tolerance, where like they feel like it's an equal equilibrium? Like I realize they need to make money, but it's not too impactful on, me and my life. Like,
exactly.
Is that a case where you could use something like this?
Yeah, in one of the companies called IVI, it was also like a Netflix. So like, probably know Netflix, right? So like, that's interesting company, because actually they wanted to actually offload a huge volume of the ads to the users just because they can. And the problem was like the users became, let's say, more churn prone after that, and that can be measured. So like what I tried to do, I actually measured the churn propensity of the different categories of users with different levels of the ad load, let's say, right? And then we have figured out what are the optimal points when it's not damaging the let's say overall value of your customer base, but still giving you the decent amount of let's say ad money out of that. So it balanced out with the actual income from the ads with the higher probability of churn. So you need to create this kind of sensitivity model, right? So like this kind of sensitivity modeling is really important when you're talking about the ads. And of course, different kinds of users can be really sensitive or not sensitive at all to the ads. So like you need to segment your customers based on that. So whether your players are really sensitive to the ads, so maybe you need to decrease the overall amounts of your ads displayed, or maybe they don't care at all. So like they get used to having tons of ads. So why shouldn't you like lose your money, right? So like, but it depends.
How do you figure out if somebody is like sensitive to an ad or not? Like, can I do that all with analytics? Do I have to actually talk to people or do surveys, or like, is there a blended approach?
It's blended approach mostly. So like actually you need to identify the category of users who actually more, let's say, sensitive to the ads or less sensitive. And basically you can see it based on how the users are interacting with ads. Are they like closing it first time they actually see this client close button, or they kind of see like they can see some longer terms. You can see some longer terms interactions with the ads, or so like they can watch it, let's say, longer, or maybe even clicking sometimes. So actually all these things about the ad interaction can be the part of the model that can predict the actual probability of accepting or not accepting the ad, or sensitivity to the ads in general. So like it can be done. So like more modern things like data science tools can really help with that. So
okay. Okay, let's go back to our kind of going through those different groups of ways that you can segment players.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did the future value one. So what's a way you can group players after that?
So actually there is another thing. It's basically called potential. It's really important. So potential is what is the user potential in terms of like spending money. So we can identify the key gaps in utilizing this potential. For example, let's say if these particular users can spend, let's say, $100 per game, and he's just spending only 5 because these dynamics or of the game or the game design process actually is not letting him to spend actually the $100, then you're missing 95% of your potential utilization. And that's really important to know for each player, or at least estimate what is the actual potential of the user for spending some money. And to know this kind of potential, you need to know what is the let's say probably the purchases within some different games. If you have some kind of portfolio of games, you can cross-reference the user and then identify the different key patterns in their behavior. So like they can help you to see, for example, that's a whale or that's a super whale. So like how you can identify whales early. So like it can be a super interesting task for the data science, for the analytics.
Okay. I have a slightly different variation of a question. So I've generally noticed that running a live game well becomes more difficult over time. And I think part of the reason is that, early on when the game is launched, you've got maybe your like golden cohort, your elder players, and then you've got the new players that are coming in. But over time, those elder players keep getting, further and further into the game, and those new players also progress, but there's always new players coming in. And so you end up having all these different kind of cohorts based on when they started. And maybe you have a spender that like blitzed out, but everyone's kind of at a different spot throughout the content, spree. And there always seems to be like, you almost need to increase the team size so that you have one person responsible for each of those different kind of nodes of players, because
Yeah.
you got to have something interesting and valuable, along the steps of the way. One of my biggest complaints with Supercell is when I'm playing Clash Royale, and they claim they have these like ungodly good machine learning algorithms to give you the perfect offer in the stores. I think they're crap, because whenever I played Clash Royale, and I played for like 5 years, I had just spent, I don't know, like weeks or months leveling up this particular card. And it's like, oh, I only need like 200 more or 40 more or whatever it is to like finish it and like upgrade it. What do they give me in the store? Do they give me the last 200, which at this point in time I probably would spend on? No, they give me like some card that like I've never used in any of my decks ever, and it made no sense to me.
Of course.
And so, one of the things I'm kind of wondering is like, well, I don't think I was ever like a super hyper spender whale. I was just like an early player. So like you probably got your elder players up here and I'm like a little bit behind. And so like, is somebody just never like looking at my cohort of group of players or something like that? So I guess I'm just kind of curious, like, do you have recommendations on how to handle like these kinds of cohorts and stuff, and without maybe like continually increasing the team size, because it might not make sense financially to do?
Yeah, what you're talking about is basically the customer lifecycle management, right? So like we can split it out for some lifecycle stages. Let's say newbies, those who actually wanted to develop, actually developing players, those who actually wanted to even more compete more, and so on. So up to the point when they really are at the top, and they need to be nurtured more than just developed, or let's say creating some kind of campaigns for let's say education of the early players, or onboarding or something like that. So like coming back to this kind of idea, what Supercell is doing, they're probably just blindly using the machine learning model, and that's kind of problem that also many companies are doing. So like the problem is you shouldn't like you blindly use like a machine learning model without understanding what is the actual let's say business rules that you need to apply with this model. So how you should structure your communication, what is the goal for your player, and basically how you can transform your knowledge that you're getting from the machine learning model to some kind of insight that you can utilize in your campaign. So how to transform this knowledge and how to apply these business rules is really kind of interesting question. So actually you need to customize it every time that you need to, depending on the actual goal. So Supercell should ask themselves, so like, what is the goal they have for you as the player?
Yeah, because my goal at that point in time was getting those last 200 cards to like, upgrade this guy.
Exactly. And they didn't like figured out what is this goal, right? So like, and how your goal matched with their goals. So like they cannot actually match it, and that's why there is a disconnect, and there is a absolute, let's say, absolutely irrelevant campaigns that you are receiving from them. And that's the key understanding of how the users should progress, is identifying their goals and matching these goals with the goals of the business for this particular player or for this particular customer. So it's also the part of the like longer customer relationship management strategy.
So that sounds super cool. For me, that maybe has 1 million or 2 million or 10 million, monthly players, how could I possibly figure out what each of their, goals are? Is Yeah. Do you have any like ways that you've
Yeah.
been able to work through that?
Yeah, sure. So like actually you have all, let's say, all your customer base. Some guys actually um, made up to some super high levels, right? So basically the idea is to understand what is the in-game progression and what are the meta they are playing. So what are the different, let's say, trajectories of developing, uh, let's say for some particular, let's say, deck of cards that you're using, for example. So you are striving to get this kind of deck, and this would be your trajectory of development. And maybe you are not the only one. So actually, there are many players who have a similar deck, right? So like they are having like a similarity in terms of like their behavior. So like they're also developing the same set of cards in a longer term perspective, right? So you can identify these clusters and figure out, okay, this is your behavioral cluster, and then we need to predict what is the next goal for you as the let's say player in this sense, in this particular trajectory. And if they can identify these trajectories of goals or trajectories of development, meta development, then they can utilize it to help you or to monetize better, because they know what you need, what you're actually up to.
Interesting. So let's pretend that I'm playing World of Warcraft. There's many things that you can do within World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
If they notice that I'm, let's say, doing auction house all the time, maybe they could infer that I'm trying to earn a certain, gold value or something to buy something or to do something in there, or that's just the way that I like to play the game.
Yeah.
If on the other hand, they notice that, hey, upon hitting max level, this player goes and they play PvP a lot. What am I trying to do? Well, maybe my goal is I want to be able to do the higher tier arenas, like the 2v2s, 3v3s. I can't do that until I get my PvP gear. So I'm doing these other, battlegrounds to earn honor so that I can get that gear. So my current goal is to get the gear so that I can get into the arena, so that I can, win, higher, better armor or whatever. Like, so you kind of like tier out those goals, and you can kind of group the players based on, hey, these are still in the battlegrounds. Oh, this person is now in the arenas. This person is over here. And you can kind of like tier it up. And the types of things that you do are oriented towards the people with that particular small goal, even though their higher level goal may ultimately be the same.
Yeah, that's right. So like that's the things that you need to identify. So like what is the intermediary goal, what is the end goal. It's really more complex for the game, like let's say RTS, because actually the space of the possible options, possible variants, it's just huge. So like, yeah, you can do something like, let's say, DeepMind did when they're trying to predict the best behavior, and actually they trying to harness the agent that actually played playing StarCraft. Maybe you heard about that. And that's the idea of getting to the top. But the key problem here is basically that the company can't afford to do this most of the time. So like for the RTS games, I would really to let's say would love to reduce this complexity to some kind of major blocks of the behaviors. And that would be it, because even with these blocks, you will get some incremental effect. And when we're talking about the more complex games like let's say even like chess or like Go or whatever games, they really have a lots of different variants. So that's why you need to understand what's your game, how the players are developing over time. So like, are they just linearly developing the things? Like most of the time they do. So like most of the time they have just a linear algorithm of development. So like in the simple casual games, let's say 95% of the market, they just linearly developing their character or their console, like they're just buying things over that same things over and over, because the game itself is really simple and let's say repetitive. But that's why they really don't care about this kind of tactical complexity or different options, different variants, and so on. It's also the segment of games that the people love to play, right? So like,
Yeah. But how would you figure out like what a player's goal? Like, let's say I'm playing something simple like a solitaire game or like I don't know, a royal match. You know, is my goal really just finishing that room and beating that next level, or does it go beyond that?
yeah, so like you can have some kind of engagement metrics that can be real time. So like depending on the things, how you are playing this particular level, for example, you can figure out whether this level is really simple for you or not that simple. And that means like you really have some problems with this. So like actually you are getting engaged. So like you're loving this challenge more, and you're trying on and on and on and trying to beat the game. Then this is your goal probably. So like you're the player who loves the challenge, right? And when we are talking about the players who actually just stop playing, so like they don't care about the complexity, so like if they encounter some problems, they just stop playing these games, start playing some other game, and so on. So that means that they just want to spend their time. So like it's just the kind of, just regular time spender, and they don't need this kind of complexity at all. So all these different kinds of players will you can also track these kind of differences in the behavior for different segments, and depending on that you can tweak your game. Or maybe if your game is the let's say wrong choice for these kind of players, maybe you can recommend to these players some other games that would be more let's say convenient for him or her to play, right? So like, or maybe more challenging depending on the goal. So especially when the companies have a huge portfolio of games, depending on the profile, some of them can be more competitive or less competitive, and depending on that, you can figure out what would be the best game for this particular player and recommend it.
Gotcha. That's really cool. Okay, so I know we don't have too much time left, but I want to switch gears just a little bit, and let's talk about like CRM systems in general. Like, are there any CRMs that you would recommend that people consider using for games, or what's maybe like the base functionality that you'd look for in a CRM system?
Yeah, for games, I'm mostly looking at the live ops management system. So basically, it's targeted marketing with some push notifications, with some in-app events, or I mean in-app messaging. So like basically, if it can support the different channels, not just the regular ones like email or like web. It also can be some social channels or even messengers, or even some things like again integrating deeply with the game and triggering some for example, some functionality in the game. So that will help you to retain the players. So the idea in terms of like CRM system, there are some players. I don't want to actually to advertise a lot.
That's okay.
But there are some
I'm
there are
curious,
some players.
yeah.
Who are I mean like companies who are doing this kind of um, products in terms of like cloud campaign management systems, and actually depending on the budget, depending on the functional requirements, depending on the complexity of the game, depending on the analytics or some other stuff, it can be really interesting challenge to implement it, because actually it's not simple. So yeah, mostly they think like, okay, but it's not too complex, I would say as well. So like it's manageable. Many companies did this, and I think like it really depends on the company's goal. So like if they want to start with something simple, they can. So like or if they want to invest in something more advanced, yeah, they can do this as well. So like again, I really don't want to kind of skew this kind of talk to the favor of some company, right? But actually there are multiple different solutions. So like, yeah, if someone's interested in a more, let's say, private discussion, I can share. Yeah,
Cool stuff. As you're kind of like getting into this thing, so there's an article by a buddy of mine that I love, that's called Homescapes is a Masterclass in Live Ops. And in there, he actually breaks down a calendar of like what Homescapes does. And what's interesting with Homescapes is I assume they know their players pretty well, but I think most players are women, right, like over 30. Probably most of them have families and busy work lives and things like that. All that to say is they don't really have a lot of time to play during the week. So Monday through Thursday, they're usually running, 1 to 3 different events in there, and they're super basic events. Like you log in, you maybe play a game or two, you get some, pretty nice rewards. Like it's almost like, well, why wouldn't I log in and get that? I'm just like hurting myself if I don't. But then come Friday, Saturday, these players have lots of time on their hands. It's the weekend, super challenging events, big rewards, big risk. It's like you got to win 10 games in a row to, earn whatever. Now, Homescapes monetizes mostly with that +5 moves. I tell you what, +5 moves, in the first game, game 1, nobody probably cares if they lose that. But you get that +5 moves in game 9 or game 10, where if you don't do that +5 moves, you have to start all the way over again and go all the way back through again. And, it really brings up the pressure. And it's like, you're so close to that reward. It's like, oh, the pressure's on. And that's where they make most of their revenue. You look at their weekly revenue spend and it spikes up according to those events. But they've really like oriented their game in a time that like, if I don't want to spend on the weekend, I still have the time to go back through and play the 10 games to try to get back to it or whatnot. And I just found that's very interesting. Have you seen similar successes in other games, kind of looking at the player, typical timeframes and trying to build the campaigns and the engagement and stuff based on their general behaviors?
Yeah, actually, there are some games who are really focusing on that. So, yeah, again, I don't want to get to some kind of names. Don't want to advertise anyone, but I would say that let's say some Kings game actually did this, and yeah, Social Point actually works on that as well. Yeah, but there are some really interesting ideas that they have found in terms of like managing the player base, and they really, I know that they're investing a lot in their customer base research, and the customer base management capabilities, I would say. So yeah, but again, the point is not to just identify when the players can spend their money, but what would be the most, let's say, most engaging cycle of the events. So it's not just one event; it can be serious events. For example, it can be like longer term events. Let's say that will take a month. But you need to do all the prerequisites to get the super nice, great final task that will give you a lot of fancy stuff. Yeah. But to do that, you need to fulfill the regular, maybe more, let's say, boring tasks. Let's say through the day, and maybe when all that stuff actually was tested and actually compared to the actual control group, and if we can see, for example, there is a huge boost of activity, at least for those customers who started to engage in this kind of longer term cycle. So it's always super beneficial to have this kind of longer term carrot, and when they can see this kind of carrot, okay, we want to get there. So like we will spend this sometime during, let's say, even 3-4 weeks, and then we can get this kind of reward. And that can be, again, the longer term engagement tactics, but they can be multiple. And I would say that we shouldn't focus on this kind of tactics. It's just, for me, it's also a bit of a tricky thing, because right now the companies are becoming really more and more inventive in terms of how to pull the money out of the pockets of players. But the idea is whether when the players, if you want to build a really customer-centric business, you need to understand what are you delivering beyond just a fun game. So what is the what is your, let's say, major goal? And the companies are not really thinking about that. So like they're really focused on this kind of longer term algorithm of pushing the games, actually pulling the cash. And they don't think about what is the extra value that they can deliver to the player beyond just fun. So yes, fun can be the main product, but whether for example, the mission of the company can be, for example, how they actually positively transform people. So like this is an idea of the truly customer-centric business. Yeah. So and yeah, so like who is the ideal player? Who is actually spending day and nights playing your game? Is it the correct idea? But I don't think so. So like the problem is like this is the huge let's say bias towards the players who just wanted to play the game and that's it. But the companies are really not giving something back, and they're not really providing some life-changing experience, or let's say educative experience, even in the fun games. Yeah, definitely. Well, Max, I know we're kind of out of time here, so I do have one last question for you, because it is the Master Retention Podcast, of course, and that's, what's one tip or trick or lesson you've learned over the years to increase retention? Like, how do you keep your players playing for longer? Yeah, the key idea is to know your player, is to understand what is the player, and basically what he needs and how to fulfill these needs. So it's not a trick; it's just a knowledge. So how to get this knowledge? There are multiple ways of getting that. But if you want to grow your retention, then you need to adapt. So adapt to the needs of users, players, and understand how the game can be changed according to these needs.
Okay, sounds good. That's great. Well, Max, if people do want to get in contact with you or, learn more about your company, is there a good way for them to do that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. They can contact me via LinkedIn or any other, channel. So let me know if you need anything. I will be glad to help you.
Cool stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much. Talk soon.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure, of course.